AITA for leaving my girlfriend after she turned my trauma into content? I didn't realize a person could feel both exposed and invisible at the same time until I heard my own story told in a stranger's voice over lo-fi music, neatly trimmed into a 1-minute clip that skipped the parts where I couldn't breathe. I was washing dishes when my phone lit up with a tag from a coworker who follows my girlfriend's account, and I clicked without thinking, expecting a recipe or her cat. Instead, there it was, my childhood, my father's drinking, the night I slept on the porch because the house smelled like gasoline and anger, the way I kept my shoes by the bed for years in case I had to run. She called it a reminder that healing isn't linear, and layered stock footage of rain on windows with a shot of her hand squeezing mine at a coffee shop. She never used my name, but anyone who knows us knows, and the comments made me feel like a product on a shelf. People typed hearts and told her she was brave for holding space, and some asked follow-ups like it was a serialized show. I stood there with suds drying on my arms, feeling my ribs pull tight around my lungs, hearing that calm influencer voice recast my survival as a lesson and my confusion as content. I kept searching for a sign of me, my voice, my consent, my context, and found only the way the story was framed to make her look like a lighthouse while I was the storm backdrop. Part of me wanted to say it was just a misstep, that she'd take it down if I asked. Another part of me cataloged all the little times I'd felt like a prop. The time she posted my hands holding a note from therapy with the caption, "Growth is messy." The way she gently redirected my grief into something digestible. The way she'd say, "This might help someone," whenever I flinched at being turned into a theme. I thought love meant letting yourself be seen, but I hadn't agreed to be packaged, and the line between sharing and selling me out had been crossed before I even noticed it was there. When I finally asked her to take the video down, she wrapped me in the kind of tenderness that feels like a soft lock. She said she understood my fear, she loved me, she would never want to hurt me, but also that the video wasn't really about me, it was about healing and community, and people were already messaging her saying it made them feel less alone. She said removing it would erase their hope, and that maybe my discomfort was actually a sign we were breaking generational silence. I heard the same tone she used when she talked to brands, warm and firm at once, and I felt my own objections shrink beneath words like purpose and impact, as if I were being rude to get in the way of helping strangers. I tried to explain the buzzing in my chest, how the clip made my memories feel staged, how the edits turned terror into a cinematic beat, how my body lit up with that old adrenaline. Only now I couldn't run because the danger wasn't a person but an algorithm, and I didn't know how to hide from it. She nodded and offered compromises that were all still compromises of me. She could blur my hand. She could change the caption to "my partner's story." She could donate the ad revenue to a hotline. She could add a trigger warning. She could ask me to share a follow-up about resilience if I felt up to it. They were all actions that assumed the video would stay. When I asked why my no wasn't enough, she said it was complicated, and I felt the earth tilt because it wasn't. In other parts of our life, she was steady and good. She remembered my deadlines and brought me snacks, left me sweet notes on the fridge, and rubbed my back when nightmares shook me awake. That goodness made it harder to name this for what it was, a theft disguised as a favor, a boundary treated like raw material. She wanted me to be proud of how far I'd come, and I am, but pride isn't permission. The next morning, I woke up to a new clip, a clarification saying she'd never share identifying details, layered with slow footage of her walking past murals about hope. The comments were worse this time. People praised her for handling criticism with grace, and one wrote that some partners aren't ready for the spotlight, and I felt myself being erased into a trope. Like the lesson wasn't about what was taken from me, but about how kindly she could accept being asked to take less. I left the apartment a week later with a suitcase that squeaked and a plant I'd promised to keep alive, because we'd bought it together the day I told her I thought I might never want kids. I left a note that didn't try to convince her of anything, just said I loved her and I couldn't be distilled. In the months since, I've had time to sit with the less Instagrammable parts of leaving, how quiet the kitchen sounds when no one else is there, how I still reach for my phone to film the morning light because she taught me to notice it, how grief can feel like a dress you keep trying to take off only to realize it's your skin. Sometimes I scroll past the old clip by accident because it lives in other accounts now, stitched and remixed, my porch nights and gasoline breath arranged into inspirational crescendos that make strangers cry between ads for weighted blankets. I mute and keep moving and wonder what it means to own a story once it's set loose. A few friends say I overreacted, that it's not like she named me or mocked me, that lots of couples share raw things online and no one owns pain. Others say I did the only thing I could if I wanted to feel whole. I think about the first time she kissed my forehead and said I was safe, how I believed her because she believed it, and how safety, like love, isn't a feeling you declare but a boundary you honor. I keep a small list on my phone of the moments I don't share with anyone, just to remind myself there are rooms inside me with doors that lock from the inside. Some nights I wonder if I made my own version of content by turning our breakup into a story in my head, polishing it for the sake of surviving it. Maybe there's no pure version of telling, only more or less care. I still won't forgive the clip, and I still love her. If loving someone means wanting them to be seen, what do you do when being seen by them means disappearing into their lens? AITA for not forgiving my friend who accidentally caused my pet's death, even years later? The first thing I noticed when I walked in that day was the silence. Not the normal kind, where the house hums and the dog's nails click across the floor, and you know someone loves you enough to follow you from room to room. This was the silence that feels like a door closing in your chest. My friend Liam was sitting on the stoop outside with his head in his hands, mumbling that he was so sorry, and I remember thinking it couldn't be that bad because sorry is a small word for big things. He'd come over to drop off some boxes and wait for the internet guy because I was at work, and he knew to latch the gate and keep the chocolate cake far from the counter and always check the backyard before opening doors. The gate was unlatched, the back door was open, and my dog, Hazel, was gone. They found her on the flat stretch of road by the park 20 minutes later with her tag bent into a mirror. People say accidents happen, and they do, but accidents leave objects behind, and the objects in this accident were a loose latch, and a beeping microwave, and Liam's phone blowing up with a message about a gig he wanted. He told me he'd put the cake on the highest shelf because he was being safe, and then he set it down for just a second to check the plumber's text, and Hazel, who loved sugar the way she loved tennis balls, jumped, and the plate shattered, and he lunged. And the door swung and panic moved faster than thought. He was crying while I knelt by her at the vet, my hands sticky with something I refused to name because names make things real. I told him to go home because my grief was too loud, and he kept saying he'd pay every bill and he'd buy me another dog, and I nodded because it was easier than saying there was no ledger that could balance this, that Hazel was not an appliance with a warranty. That there are lives we hold like lanterns, and when they go out they don't get replaced, they just leave you walking at night with your hands out. People were kind in the way they know how to be when love is small enough to see. They brought soup, they texted hearts, they asked for pictures, and told me their favorite Hazel memory like we were knitting a net beneath the fall. Liam showed up with flowers and a written apology that felt like a homework assignment. He said all the right things, he took responsibility, he didn't make excuses, he didn't beg for forgiveness, but there was this glitter of panic in his eyes that made me feel like I was the one holding his fate instead of my own. He Venmo'd me the vet bill before I asked, and then he sent money for a memorial stone without asking if I wanted one, and then he slid into problem solving like it was CPR. He researched trainers and breeders and rescues, built a spreadsheet of adoption events, tried to outsource the hole in my chest to logistics. I stopped answering his messages because every bullet point sounded like a cover letter to the universe, arguing why he deserved absolution. He told our friends he didn't expect me to forgive him, he just wanted to earn my trust back, and they repeated his words to me like they were proof of goodness. Maybe they were. He'd been my closest friend since college, the person who knew every version of me and made me laugh even when it was rude to laugh, the person who helped my mom move and slept on my futon when the ceiling leaked. The weight of that history pressed against the weight of Hazel's absence until I couldn't tell which side the scale wanted to belong to. At night I'd scroll through old videos of Hazel bringing me shoes she thought were toys, and somewhere beneath the ache there was this hard nugget of anger that kept me warm like an ember. I didn't want to put it out because it made the empty rooms feel less cold. When Liam finally asked if we could talk, he sat across from me and said he would accept whatever I decided. I tried to decide. I pictured forgiving him and felt my jaw clench. I pictured never speaking to him again and felt my stomach drop. It wasn't vengeance or mercy I wanted. I wanted time to reverse and for him to be the version of himself who always double-checked the latch. Years do what they do, which is make edges softer without changing the shape of the thing. I moved apartments because the corners of the old one held too many echoes. I fostered a senior dog for 6 months and loved him gently like a temporary sunset. Liam and I became people who nod in group photos. We send each other hollow holiday texts. He got married last spring, and I sent a gift from the registry and watched the video of their first dance and felt that complicated tenderness for someone you remember holding your secrets. Sometimes I think the distance is a failure of character on my part, like the moral test showed up and I refused to take it. Sometimes I think drawing the line saved me from growing around resentment like a tree swallowing a fence. On Hazel's birthday, I walked to the park with coffee and stand where the road bends and let myself cry without witnesses. I think about the chain of small choices that makes a life and how easy it is to clip one link and pretend the chain didn't move. If I forgive Liam, I worry I'm telling the part of me that keeps watch that she imagined it, that vigilance is silly, that love should always be flexible even when it breaks. If I don't forgive him, I worry I'm choosing a story where I'm always right but never free. People say forgiveness is for you, not them, but my body hasn't figured out how to file the paperwork. I'm not waiting for an apology he already gave. I'm not waiting for a dog I can't have back. I'm not waiting for the world to be fair. I'm waiting for an internal click that may never come, and I'm learning to live a good life even if it doesn't. I can hold that Liam is a decent man who made a terrible mistake and that his mistake reordered something sacred. I can hold that he'd take it back before he took another breath. I can hold that Hazel loved everyone and would probably wag at him if she saw him today. Maybe that's the closest I'll get to forgiveness, loving the memory of a dog who didn't keep score. Does that make me the villain for keeping mine? AITA for not telling my husband that his sister confessed feelings for me? It happened one night when I was half asleep on the couch, the kind of tired that makes the world feel blurred at the edges. My husband's sister, Emily, had been staying with us for a few weeks after breaking up with her fiancé. She was quiet at first, the kind of quiet that hides under politeness, but slowly she started talking again, helping around the house, laughing with me the way she used to before things got complicated in her life. We'd always gotten along. She was warm, witty, and had this strange ability to make you feel like you were the only person in the room when she listened. That night, we were watching some forgettable movie when she turned to me, eyes glassy from the wine we'd been sharing, and said she had something to tell me. I remember the way her fingers twisted in the blanket like she was trying to wring the words dry before they came out. She said she had feelings for me, had for a long time, and she knew it was wrong, knew it made no sense, but she couldn't carry it anymore. I froze. I didn't know whether to laugh, to run, or to comfort her. I told her gently that I loved her, but not like that, and that we should just forget it ever happened. She nodded, crying quietly, apologizing over and over, and I thought it was done. But the next morning, she was gone. She packed her things and left before sunrise, leaving only a short note for her brother saying she needed space. For days, I debated whether to tell my husband. He's close to Emily, he's always been her protector, and I knew how fragile she'd been after her breakup. If I told him, it would crush him, maybe even make him see her differently. She'd already lost her fiancé, her job, her apartment. I couldn't be the final person to take away her brother's trust. So, I said nothing. I told him she left because she needed to heal, and he accepted it with a quiet sadness. I convinced myself it was kindness. That keeping her secret wasn't lying, it was sparing two people I loved from unnecessary pain. But in the quiet moments, I could feel it sitting between us, a live wire humming in my chest. I replayed the confession, her shaking hands, the way she looked at me like I'd already broken her heart just by existing. I told myself I'd done the right thing, but the longer I kept it to myself, the less sure I became of what right even meant. A few weeks later, the cracks started to show. My husband grew distant, not angry, just distracted. He'd mention Emily now and then, his voice low with worry, and I'd give vague answers I hoped sounded comforting. I told him she was probably fine, that she just needed time. I tried to act normal, but guilt has a scent, and soon it was thick in the air. I could see it in his eyes, that flicker of suspicion he couldn't quite name. One evening he asked if something had happened before she left. The question landed like a match in dry grass. I wanted to tell the truth. I really did. But when I opened my mouth, the image of Emily's trembling hands came back, and I froze again. I told him no, nothing happened. She'd just been emotional. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Then, a week later, Emily texted me. Just a single message, "I'm sorry." I shouldn't have said anything. I stared at it for hours, unsure what to respond. I typed and deleted a dozen replies, forgiveness, anger, confusion, but ended up saying only, "It's okay. Take care of yourself." I thought that would be the end of it. But that night, my husband saw her name on my phone. He asked why she was apologizing. I told him it was about her ex, but his expression hardened, the kind of look that tells you he's connecting dots you didn't even know existed. He didn't press further, but the air between us changed. Conversations felt shorter. His hugs became quick, perfunctory. I started having dreams where everything spilled out, her confession, my silence, his heartbreak, and I'd wake up drenched in guilt. I'd see his phone on the counter and wonder if he was texting her, asking questions I'd been too afraid to answer. I loved him deeply, but every day I stayed quiet, that love felt a little more like cowardice. I told myself I was protecting everyone, but what I was really doing was protecting myself from the mess, from the shame, from the way he might look at me once he knew. And the more time passed, the harder it became to tell the truth without it sounding like a lie. It's been almost a year since that night, and sometimes I still feel the weight of it pressing against my ribs like a secret I swallowed wrong. Emily eventually moved to another city and seems to be doing better. She sends my husband photos of her new place and ends every message with "Love you, bro," like nothing ever happened. He's happier now too, or at least, he looks that way. But sometimes, when he catches me staring at nothing or when he asks out of nowhere if I've heard from her, I see that flicker again, that quiet wondering he's too gentle to voice. I know he feels there's something unsaid, and I hate that he's right. The truth is, I never told him because I was afraid of what it would do to him, to us. But now I realize that silence has been doing the damage anyway, just slower, quieter. I've imagined the confession 100 ways, how I'd start, how his face would fall, how the space between us would fill with something we couldn't name. Some nights, I rehearse it in my head and almost say it out loud, but I stop at the edge of the words, because once I speak them, I can't go back to before. There's no version of this story where no one gets hurt. I wonder sometimes if honesty is always the noble choice, or if mercy has its own kind of morality. Emily trusted me not to destroy her. My husband trusted me not to lie. And here I am, balancing both kinds of betrayal like two fragile glasses I can't put down. Maybe the kindest thing I can do is carry this alone. Or maybe that's just another excuse to avoid the fallout. I don't know anymore. I look at my husband sometimes and see the life we've built, simple, peaceful, real, and I wonder if telling the truth now would be an act of love or cruelty. So, what do you think? ATA for keeping a confession that wasn't mine to tell? Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed the story. See you in the next one.